Good morning. Welcome to the Graphient Embracing the Future Distributed Cloud Networking webinar. I'm very honored to have Mauricio Sanchez from Dell'Oro with me this morning to really drive a discussion about what is the future of networking? What's the future of WAN? How are enterprises' needs changing, and how does technology change to meet those needs? So Mauricio, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Matt. Really glad to be here.
So I'll hand it to you to kind of jump in and give us the vision of where you see the future of networking going.
Thanks, Matt. By way of introduction, for maybe some of your audience doesn't know who Dell'Oro is, we're a quantitative market research firm based in Northern California, in the Bay Area, where I'm also located, and been here 4 years, but now celebrate 25 years in the networking and security industry. So I've been around this rodeo a couple times, and what I'm here to talk about is this the next step in terms of what we see as the evolution of SD-WAN, SASE, multi-cloud networking, and of what's happening as things with network as a service. And when I sat down in the last couple of years to think about this, I decided on the term distributed cloud networking because that's, I think, really where we're going towards is having and stitching multiple islands, very cloud-centric sorts of models. But before I get into kind of what distributed cloud networking is, let's back up a little bit and talk about why are we here, right? Because if we look at the WAN and how enterprises have embraced the network architectures that have worked so well for the last couple decades, I look at the pandemic as being that black swan moment that kind of slapped everyone across the face because it unleashed what I call a IT transformation trifecta, right? It was a crisis that continues to reverberate through a lot of conversations because the pandemic caused a massive acceleration of transformation on the cloud. So that's the first transformation area. So with applications shifting to the cloud, making sure that during the pandemic, enterprise apps were enabled on the internet, ultimately in service of strengthening the digital experience because everyone needed to work remotely. So that was the first thing that kind of slapped a lot of IT architects. Secondarily is then the evolution and the revolution that's happening on the edge, right? So now we're moving into a world with compute being ignited on the edge for value-added reasons because we're enabling a new class of applications. Whether it's AI centric or not, I think we see vision, IoT, communications, and augmented reality, all with the pixie dust of AI coming into view in a lot of enterprises. Again, as this hyper distributed enterprise post-pandemic starts to emerge. And lastly, and probably the poster child of during the pandemic, was just the workforce transformation, right? So being able to shift from a world where everyone was in the office to overnight everyone working remotely. Now the steady state appears to be that we're going to split our time, right? Sometime in the office, a couple days a week, and several days in somewhere else, likely at home or the coffee shop or what have you. So that demands a very different set of network requirements. So I call this the IT transformation trifecta that during the pandemic generated a perfect storm of needs. And as we look at what now transpires and how the rubber is meeting the road, I'm looking at a sequence of use cases here, which I show on this slide, which are circled around 3 theaters that I think about in terms of touch points in this modern WAN and where we're evolving to, right? Because you've got on one side, you got the users as in the edge and the revolution of the things like SASE. On the opposite end, you've got the revolutions that happen in the cloud architecture with applications being transformed from being on-prem monolithic to hyper-distributed across multiple clouds and causing all sorts of new networking requirements. And then you've got the evolution and revolution that's happening in the middle mile, right? As you stitch users to applications, that places a whole new set of demands. And again, there are a set of use cases that I see here ranging from multi-cloud to workload, all the way to branch transformation and everything in between, right? We're going to double click on a couple of these, but the takeaway here is that the way that we're going towards and the use cases that we're trying to service aren't going to be serviced by the way that we did things before, right? And on this slide, in this diagram, now I highlight 4 different approaches that have been in the tool chest for a lot of network architects and talk about where are they falling short, right? So let's just talk about the hub and spoke model. The hub and spoke model has been kind of an architecture that's been with us for 30 plus years, right? So you put home run everything into the middle, into headquarters, and then from there send it on forward. That just in the age of cloud falls flat on its face, right? You can't be sending all traffic to a central point and then sending it on to a cloud. It's too costly, it's too complex. Ultimately, security isn't where it needs to be. So the hub and spoke model is out. And secondarily, we then shifted to SD-WAN, right? Kind of the hub and spoke shifted for a lot of enterprises to a mesh architecture with SD-WAN, with the edge devices taking a lot of the forwarding decision making under the auspices of a controller. But we see that as those environments build out and the requirements continue to become larger and more complex, SD-WAN starts running out of gas. Right? For certain environments, yes, it works fine. I'm not here to say that SD-WAN should be thrown out and replaced altogether. I'm just saying that you got to be thinking about where the puck is going. Got to be thinking about how to address the requirements that I'm talking about here under the context of the IT transformation trifecta. And when it comes to SD-WAN, we got to be thinking about the next layer and the next state and next evolution of that architecture, because it's today's SD-WAN is starting to run into scaling challenges, performance, as well as complexity as you get to a hybrid distributed or a large size environment. Another way that people have tackled it is just, hey, let's go ahead, Matt.
We're familiar with those SD-WAN challenges. I mean, if you look at the Graphiant team, we know SD-WAN, we know SD-WAN very well. And Khaled Raza, our founder and CEO, talks about his vision for SD-WAN when he founded Viptela in 2012 was only 25% of the full vision of what he wanted to do with the network. And really, the challenges that we're running into now are things that he talked about seeing in 2013, 2014.
Wow, that's amazing that we're here 10 years later and still working on the 80% or the 60% that's left to solve. But so is life, right? Technology shifts are slow, and we're here to talk about kind of where are things going and how do we start evolving the architecture, right? Because a lot of enterprises think in terms of decades, not necessarily in being able to turn on a dime. So as I was saying, it's the fourth or the third way people address this is just let's just embrace the traditional comms service provider, right? A lot of people still have that type of approach, and not to say that they don't have their place, but the old way of doing things where it was a manual contract with humans in the background, and you needed to wait 30 days or 90 days to get a circuit set up. In the age of cloud, in today's age of where business runs at a much faster rate of pace, that's unacceptable, bar none, right? That's just not the way that the network can be operated on. And so again, that's another dead end that I see that we can't continue to leverage. And then you've got enterprises who are embracing the cloud, and then they run to the buzzsaw of, oh my gosh, AWS networking looks completely different from Google networking, which looks completely different from Microsoft networking, at least when you get down to the brass tacks of how they each operate and the nuances and caveats of each. And so we are starting to see how people are starting to rip out their hair because of that differences, as well as then the fear of being locked in if they go all in on one cloud, because no one wants to do that. Everyone wants to be multi-cloud. So the native cloud service provider networking is yet another challenge that's come into view in the last couple of years, that altogether, these 4 approaches that people have are trying to use, we feel are not the path forward to addressing the IT transformation trifecta. So let me double click now and talk about a little bit more about the challenges, right? And I'm going to pick two here. The first one I want to talk about is the B2B networking, which is an example of what I call inter and intra-enterprise networking here, right? So think about mergers and acquisition, which happens very frequently. Two companies come together. They have overlapping IP addresses. They've got an architecture where they need to ensure that certain partners and certain divisions can be brought together so they can communicate. Today, I call that the human glue approach, where people are literally, I remember when I was at HPE and where I spent many years, anytime we bought a company, it was literally all hands on deck to make sure that firewall rules were tweaked, that routing rules were tweaked, that we placed, that the right NAT gateways were placed, and ultimately something broke. Right? It was ugly, it was complex, it was insecure, and there's got to be a better way. And that's just an example of the challenges that today many businesses face, that we definitely have a better way of doing these things, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. So that's B2B networking from a challenge perspective.
I think I've heard that referred to as human middleware.
Yes, the human glue, the human middleware, right? The human router and firewall. It just doesn't work. And now let me flip to kind of the multi-cloud networking, which is again a more modern one. And I already talked a little bit about this in a previous slide, because here it's the same set of challenges in terms of you have to insert a lot of humans to understand the nuances and caveats of each cloud service provider's own way of doing networking limitations. And that's kind of a common theme throughout this, is that a lot of these use cases, with enough elbow grease, you can get away with solving them, but it's taxing on the IT teams. Ultimately, no one's happy with the rate of progress, no one's happy with the end state. And so there's got to be a better way to do this as we evolve and look at then how these challenges need to be addressed faster in a more automated, in a more secure fashion. And all of these cases have similar sorts of challenges, right? And I think that's a common thread that I'll be touching on in terms of the motivations for distributed cloud networking. And so we take a step back. So then what is it that we really are aspiring to get from this new set of solutions that are coming into view? And that's what the slide that I have here seeks to talk about, right? Is that we're in this world where we've got three transformations afoot, where people are doing cloud, edge, and workforce transformations. So what does a networking solution need to look like, right? And what I like to talk about is that the solution needs to understand and comprehend the cloud in terms of getting traffic to the cloud, into the cloud, and through the cloud. So being able to understand all those dimensions that are now an extension of the corporate network when you've got traffic going into a cloud service provider. At the edge, it's about being able to provide robust, secure connectivity to the edge, being able to support the ascension of the compute capabilities are starting to come into view for those edge application use cases, and taking advantage of that intelligence at the edge to be able then to make sure that those applications that are being distributed are performant and are able to run as they were designed to do. And then on the workforce one, it's about consistency on the connectivity, the performance, and security, all in service to make sure that the end users can get their job done, right? It's like, you don't want to get in the way, you don't want to make sure, you don't want to be insecure. And so you've got this set of requirements all come into view that the legacy approaches by themselves can't address.
So, Mauricio, is the modern enterprise WAN really even a WAN? Is it a wide area network?
That's a great question, Matt. And I always have if I had my druthers, I'd use a completely different term to talk about this, because it's not really it's not your grandma's WAN anymore, right? It's not the classical backbone MPLS with heavy duty routing that was came from or looked like a lot like a service provider type of implementation. But ultimately, we need to anchor it to something that people can latch their minds onto, right? And that's why I call it the modern enterprise WAN. But you make a good point, Matt, that what we're talking about here is more than the WAN, right? It's not just a replacement for the legacy approach that we are very accustomed to. So then, what is that solution looking like to us here at Dell'Oro? And that's where I coined the term distributed cloud networking, because like anything in the technology landscape, there are predecessor technologies. It's an evolution, and with taking elements that have worked well, and as I like to say, taking the best and reinventing the rest. And what I see the technology landscape coming from are three points of clustering of technology islands, as so to speak. I think we're all very familiar with SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, in terms of being user transformation and branch transformation, and bringing the goodness of making sure that the edge is much more agile and the workforce transformation is being serviced well. But the other two are probably not yet as well known, right? And so I'm here to be able then to spearhead and push the knowledge forward on each of these two. Now, the first one in the lower right-hand corner is multi-cloud networking software. So that is a set of software that now is starting to percolate into public cloud service providers in service of homogenizing and extending the goodness of what's controlled in that WAN side of the house, so outside the public cloud service providers, and being able to tickle the networking constructs inside the public cloud service provider, right? So being able to extend the control, the visibility, the security into the public cloud service provider's environment, in many instances taking advantage of the underlying constructs provided by a public cloud service provider, but being able to bring again that control and visibility back to the IT administrator. The other one here that probably isn't as well known, and again, this is a question of terminology. I call it WAN as a service, or many people call it network as a service. And I know that's an overloaded term, right? Because if we look at the history of NaaS, network as a service, it's a term that's been with us for many years now. But I'm here to talk about how I think there is a evolution, there is a redefinition that needs to happen, because the way I see it, the way people were using NaaS in the past wasn't really reflective of the way that it now is starting to be used, which is more reflective of the way that IaaS for the cloud service providers came into view, and is a true form of the change in consumption models and the delivery models for that class of technologies. So I see these three technology elements starting to come together and to be able to create this new class of solutions that, again, I call distributed cloud networking. In the next couple of slides, I want to double click a little bit more about what this really means in terms of how is it different from the legacy approaches, how is it different from where we're coming from. And the first way to look at this is to think about and answer the question, what are the characteristics of distributed cloud networking? Again, the solution, in my view, needs to comprehend the multiple theaters and the multiple points of transformation that are happening in the enterprise. So I already talked about the cloud transformation, the edge transformation, and the workforce transformation. And so for each of these, the solution needs to be able to play a role in being able to bring more security, more scalability, agility, and elasticity. And so these are common threads of capabilities that are anchored to a very strong delivery and capability around visibility, analytics, automation, again, security. And so these are the core to what these solutions are starting to provide as part of their entree. And the consumption change, because I think there's also a relevant discussion to be had around consumption. Well, networking in the past was a very box-driven, a very circuit-driven, where you bought your boxes, you went to your communication service provider, you bought your transport links, and then you stitch it all together, and then you ran off to the races. Now, the world is shifting from what that world was very capex to very opex, because I think the underlying paradigm shift here is to make the network look more like a cloud service that we've been accustomed to in the public clouds, where you want to stand up a virtual server and say that AWS, boom, you swipe your credit card, and 30 seconds later, you've got a machine that's available to you to run your applications. I think that is one of the key tenets here that we're moving to in this world towards distributed cloud networking. And to continue to beat on kind of differences between the usage of NaaS in other domains and in other arenas. Here at Dell'Oro, we've been looking at the NaaS phenomenon now for a couple of years, and together with my colleagues, we came up with, how is NaaS different from the other ways of looking at it? So what we decided is that, well, there are 7 different attributes. I won't get into each of these individually, other than to say that if you look at the delivery and the consumption models of public cloud, we believe that the same characteristics that are tied to public cloud in terms of the outcome orientation, elasticity, the maintenance-free, that the being able to do high levels of automation are part of this world that is coming into the networking. So very different from the usage of NaaS in the past, which has been more so a managed service with humans, that human glue, that human middleware in the background, stitching everything together. Probably fine if your pace of business is quite slow and you've got the time and the willingness and the patience to wait. But I don't know about you all, but I think enterprises are becoming very impatient and they need to move quickly. And this is the attributes, the 7 attributes that we see when it comes to NaaS, and making the solution consumable, elastic, agile, and secure at a moment's notice.
Nobody's patient.
Everyone wants to, we're in a TikTok generation, right? It's like you've got 15-second attention span. It's like we're going full circle from being 3-year-olds again, that you've got 15 seconds to get to the end state here. So the last way I want to talk about here in terms of defining distributed cloud networking is a topology, right? Because so far I've just described it more in descriptive details, amorphous, and I always like to make things a little bit real because I'm a visual sort of person. And what I'm sharing here is a generic architecture. And the takeaways here is the fact that the solutions that for some folks are independent are coming together. And those solutions that I already talked about, these technologies, are things like SASE, multi-cloud networking software, or the WAN as a service fabric, right? We want to be thinking this as one collective whole in order to service those 3 transformation areas that I talked about. So cloud, edge, and workforce. And the key tenet here is that your traffic is processed over a distributed fabric that exists off on the internet, right? So you stitch your resources, your people, your clouds to this distributed fabric that some people call engineered internet. I really like to talk about it as a purpose-built fabric that does more and is more agile than, again, the classical WAN backbones. So getting back to your comment, Matt, it's kind of hard to call this a WAN anymore, right? This is a very different beast. We'll have to come up with a new way of calling this versus just saying this is a new enterprise WAN. That's the description of distributed cloud networking. Let me now shift to, okay, what's the vendor landscape? Because here at Dell'Oro, we're quantitative, so we're doing market tracking, we're doing market sizing. We're trying to tease out where the markets are going to help our clients understand where the big bets are being made. And when I look at the vendors landscape for distributed cloud networking, it comes from a number of pedigrees that I show here on this slide. It comes from the likes of public cloud. It comes from the SASE side. It comes from traditional networking suppliers. And then the new kids on the block here that are newer ones into this neighborhood are the multi-cloud networking folks. And then this WAN as a service, right? Again, separating out the traditional managed NaaS offerings from a traditional telco from the more modern style that is much more on-demand, elastic, and getting to the races in a very short amount of time. And so I see these vendors starting to kind of merge or run into each other, right? Because they're starting to service use cases that run that gamut of the use cases that I talked about. And so I do see that the world will shift towards that we will see before long a collection of vendors that say, look, we are the new modern WAN that can service from edge, the cloud, and everything in between on the edge. So preview of coming attractions here from the vendor landscape. So let's bring it home here. Rather than saying concluding on the usual terms of dictating a prescriptive set of actions, I leave you with a set of bullets, and I'd love to get Matt's take on each of these, because the core question that hopefully everyone is asking themselves is the approach that I discussed today the right approach for yourself? And in order to answer that, I came up with four questions. The first one, and I'd love to hear Matt's comments here in just a second, is how are you meeting the demands of the modern enterprise and in terms of applications, remote work, and edge computing, right? Are you using one of those four ways, or maybe another legacy way and with a lot of human middleware? Maybe you are. Second, security, top of mind for everyone. No conversation that I have doesn't have security in some form or another, and particularly in the vein of zero trust principles being applied to the solution. So what are you doing to elevate your zero trust capabilities, and in doing so, elevate your security posture of your network? Third question is, how are you providing to your business units elastic on-demand network capabilities, right? I'm not talking about here that a network that takes 90 days to stand up and be ready for the races. I'm talking about that you close the merger and acquisition, and over the weekend by Monday, you're ready to hit the road in the races on that coming Monday with a network that can talk between those two enterprises. And lastly, how are you removing the human middleware while being able to take advantage of all the benefits that you'd like to imbue into your networking solution in terms of policy enforcement and multi-cloud, and making sure that you get your cake and have it and be able to eat it as well? So this is, for us, the core questions about distributed cloud networking. And for us, we see a bright future. Again, we're quantitative here at Dell'Oro, doing market tracking, and already started publishing reports on this particular topic. And we see this market blossoming very quickly, as you could show or see here on the right-hand side in terms of our market forecast. So bright days ahead. So with that, let me hand it to Matt to understand, what's Graphian's perspective on some of these questions.
Well, I think first I have to start off by saying I didn't write these questions, but I feel like I could have. I really, you have you have nailed, I think all four of them nail core principles for Graphian. When I look at the first one around the demands of the modern enterprise, applications, remote work, and edge computing, our earliest customer was a former SD-WAN customer, Valmont Industries, that needed to move beyond traditional kind of edge. I'm just connecting my factories and looking at, hey, I have data that's being generated on large center pivot sprinklers. How do I collect that data, and how do I bring that data securely, seamlessly, and quickly into somewhere where I can analyze it? And now with, large language models and AI, understand based on visual pictures of crops what I need to do. Do I need to add herbicide? Do I need to add insecticide? Do we need to increase the water? So it's very much a moving beyond that traditional edge, just like you've called out here. We also have another customer that's a robotics customer. And Mauricio, you made a comment earlier about augmented reality and kind of the needs that will drive. Exactly what we're seeing with this robotics customer. Connecting edges that aren't traditional edges, that are things like sprinklers or robots or even police cars, connecting those in real time, providing a distributed, private, secure fabric, hitting your second point there, so that they can process data, so that they can get that connectivity and they can really modernize their business. And then the last one, simplifying operations. Really, that's one of the keys to network as a service, and one of our key tenets at Graphian, around taking the heavy burden off of the enterprise, taking the heavy burden off of architects, engineers, operations teams, but still giving them visibility and control, and the ability to use business policy and business requirements to define their connectivity across this modern, as you said, distributed cloud network. And then the third bullet, again, this is a core tenet of Graphian. The ability, you called it elasticity. We say flex up, flex down. The ability to seamlessly, quickly connect and consume this fabric, and then having the ability, based on user demands, application demands, current business process, hey, I need to flex up the amount of connectivity that I have to those sites. And then at the end of the month, I'm going to flex back down because that business project is over, because that merger has been fully integrated. They're now on the corporate network, things like that. So we see a huge demand in the enterprise for that type of flexibility. So I think, like I said, I couldn't have written these questions better myself.
And for the record, I wrote them myself, so Matt didn't contribute, because I think these are the conversations that I'm having with clients and enterprise architects, right? Because these are the challenges that everyone's facing, and so they're seeking what is the evolution of today's technology that is evolving into tomorrow's. And for me, distributed cloud networking is that umbrella term to capture where I see things going very quickly into the enterprise. So again, Matt, thank you for providing here the spotlight to be able to share some of the thoughts about what's happening in the marketplace, and hopefully your audience has taken a couple nuggets of wisdom about what they should be thinking about.
Yeah, I appreciate the time, Mauricio. I really appreciate the time. And I would also like to say, much like I didn't write these questions, we did not plan to match, but you have beautiful fashion sense.
Very good. I return the compliment, Matt.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.